It's undeniable that Fabiano Caruana has a little bit of an asterisk around his name. In a podcast with Lex Friedman in 2022, referring to the 2018 World Chess Championship between Magnus and Fabiano, Magnus Carlsen said,
"I felt like, all the way, this is an interesting match against an opponent who is, at this position, at this point, equal to me."
This has been a maintained belief amongst many grandmasters since then. If you're looking for the best player in the world should Magnus retire, it's Fabiano Caruana. He has the third highest peak rating in chess history at 2,844, which he achieved in 2014, and he has maintained that level of greatness for over a decade, with a live rating of 2,792 at the time of recording. The issue that Fabiano Caruana faces now is that there is no more Magnus Carlsen as a get-out-of-jail-free card. In the last 3 World Championship cycles, he's failed to win the candidates on every occasion. I think because of this, a lot of people have started to wonder, has Fabiano missed his window? And better yet, how does this affect his legacy? But the question that interests me most is, why does he keep falling short of greatness? And to answer that question, we need to go back to the 2014 Sinquefield Cup. The Sinquefield Cup is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, American tournament on the chess calendar. The event in 2014 was only the second iteration of the tournament, but boasted a field of players averaging 2,801 elo. So unlike some recent editions where it can be argued that there are easier points to pick up than others, this field was rock solid. A 21-year-old Fabiano Caruana would take an early lead in round 1, beating former FIDE world champion Veselin Topalov with the black side. It's extremely rare you see someone suffocate their opponent as the black side at this level, let alone against Topalov. Fabiano would win in round 2 against Maxime Bashir-Lagrave, and in round 3 he won with the black side against a 2,877 rated Magnus Carlsen. He won in round 4 against Levon Arignan, beat Hikaru with the black side in round 5, and in round 6 he beat Topalov for the second time. The streak continued in round 7, beating Maxime with the black side, and was finally held to a draw by Magnus Carlsen in the 8th round, who spent the entire middle game on the back foot. With the tournament well and truly wrapped up in what looked like a show of mercy, Fabiano drew Hikaru in the Berlin defense in round 9, and made a draw with Levon in the final round 2. Fabiano finished on 8.5 out of 10 points in what was easily the most difficult tournament in chess history. He recorded the highest performance rating ever of 3,098 elo, and was clearly knocking on the door of Magnus Carlsen's reign. And just 2 years later, Fabiano would get his first chance. Since Fabiano's dominant Sinquefield Cup, he had reached a peak of 2,844 elo, won Dortmund 2015, and won the 2014-15 FIDE Grand Prix, which saw him qualify for the 2016 candidates. The 2016 candidates was a field with an average rating of 2,777 elo, a weaker field than his 2014 Sinquefield Cup, but a significantly more challenging occasion. Caruana would draw his first 6 games, a solid yet unspectacular start, seeing him 1 point behind leaders Arignan and Karyakin. By round 11 though, Fabiano had covered tremendous ground, leading the pack on 6.5 points alongside Anand. In that same round, Fabiano had a completely winning position in time trouble, but by move 38 he threw his advantage with rook e1, allowing white to recover with the incredible tactic of rook takes c5. Despite the draw, Anand would give Fabiano a lifeline, dropping points to Karyakin that round, seeing the race for the 2016 candidates between Sergei and Fabiano. And as fate might have it, they paired each other in the final round. Fabiano played with black and showed incredible knowledge of the Sicilian defense, defending Karyakin's Richter Rauser with immense understanding. As long as Peter Svidler held Anand to a draw in their game, Karyakin could settle for a draw in this one, so Fabiano was the one pressing in a must-win tie. But by move 33, Fabiano was playing on increment, and on move 36, a rushed rook e4 allowed the brilliant rook takes d5 from Karyakin. If e takes d5, queen takes d5, and the black king is simply too exposed. On move 42, Caruana would resign and sent Karyakin to the World Chess Championship. Following this, Mark Crowther from This Week in Chess said,
"Caruana looks just about ready for a World Championship match, and this was a fine debut at this level. Most likely, Karyakin's previous experience in 2 candidates events made the difference."
This candidates couldn't come fast enough for Fabiano. He was 26, heading into what should be the peak of his career. In 2016, Fabiano won the US Chess Championship and won Olympiad Gold for the US. He tied for first at the Gashimov Memorial and the Isle of Man Open. In 2017, he won the London Chess Classic and would qualify for the 2018 candidates by rating alongside Wesley So. Caruana and Arignan were the favorites for the tournament, and by round 7, Caruana had a sole lead on 5 points to Mamedyarov's 4.5. From round 8 to 11 though, Fabiano drew every round, sitting on his lead with what he later described as overly defensive play. Then in round 12, Fabiano's defensiveness blew the tournament wide open as he lost to Karyakin and joint leader Mamedyarov lost to Ding. 5 players were now in contention to win the event. In round 13, Fabiano would beat Aragnan, restoring a 0.5 point lead as he was the round's only victor in the race. And in the final round, Karyakin blundered against Ding and Mamedyarov was held to a draw by Kramnik. Caruana only needed a draw against Grishuk to win the event, but instead beat him outright, winning the tournament by a full point. Following his statement win, Fabiano said,
"I'm absolutely thrilled. Coming into today, I wasn't sure what would happen, and this couldn't have gone better. A few days ago, I thought the tournament was already out of my hands when I lost the game, and somehow things just came together perfectly at the end."
Garry Kasparov would describe Caruana as the most stable ship in a stormy sea, whilst Karyakin thought that Fabiano's win was quite a fair result. There are plenty of other quotes like this describing Fabiano as this stable and consistent player and not this destined winner. And the championship match between Magnus and Fabiano reflected that. It consisted of 12 straight draws, with somewhat of a controversy occurring in the final round, with the players agreeing to a draw in a position where Magnus was slightly better. But in the end, the players drew, and the match was sent to tiebreaks. Caruana had come undone in the first tiebreak, playing king takes e4 and blundering into a worse endgame which Magnus would go on to win. In the second and third tiebreak, Fabiano was again second best to Magnus, who found his footing in the new time control. Magnus had won all 3 tiebreaks and Fabiano was sent back to the drawing board. Following his defeat, Fabiano said,
"I've always considered the main goal was not to play a world championship match, but to actually become a world champion. What you need to win a tiebreak is to find your best form, and I couldn't."
The candidates would roll around 2 years later for Fabiano, and he qualified by being the runner-up in the previous World Chess Championship. He had a pretty strong in-between period. He finished 3rd overall in the 2018 Grand Chess Tour. He won the Pro Chess League with the St. Louis Archbishops, and his strongest result was winning Tata Steel in 2020. But to keep it short, a pattern would begin to emerge for Fabiano at this year's candidates. At the halfway point, Fabiano would find himself a point behind tournament leaders Maxime Bashir-Lagrave and Jan Nepomniachtchi. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic though, this candidates would be paused for 13 months until April 2021. Making it the longest chess tournament in history. But the extended break seemed to work in Fabiano's favor. Caruana sprung a fantastic novelty on Maxime in round 8, beating him in a 6-hour marathon to tie him on points and come within half a point of Nepomniachtchi. But despite a great restart, Caruana would drop points to Alexienko in round 9 despite being up material twice during the game. Instead of pushing forwards after grabbing 2 free pawns, he chose a passive line, allowing Alexienko to seal a draw. In round 10, he would also draw against leader Jan Nepomniachtchi, meaning winning the tournament was now out of his hands. He had to rely on results going his way. In round 11, he would win against Wang Hao, but in round 12, in a must-win game against Anish Giri, he lost. After draws in round 13 and 14, Fabiano went out with a whimper in the 2020 candidates. The 2022 candidates is a much more recent memory for most of us, and it was the first occasion where there would be a question mark around the involvement of Magnus Carlsen. After Magnus beat Jan Nepomniachtchi in the 2021 World Championship, he said in an interview,
"Those who expect me to play the next time for the World Championship might be disappointed."
By the time the candidates had commenced, Magnus had extended this by stating,
"If someone other than Firouzja wins the candidates tournament, it is unlikely that I will play the next World Championship match."
So, this marks the first chapter in the post-Magnus era. Fabiano would start this tournament knowing it was his best chance at becoming a world champion. And to begin with, it went exactly that way. In the first half of the tournament, Fabiano scored a fantastic 5 out of 7. He should probably consider himself unlucky to be chasing Jan Nepomniachtchi by half a point at this stage, as he really hadn't put a foot wrong. But as this chapter of the video would suggest, he simply collapsed. In round 8, he lost to Nakamura. Round 9, he drew with Nepomniachtchi, and in rounds 10 and 11, he lost to Jan-Christoph Duda and Ding Liren. Fabiano drew rounds 12 and 13, and in round 14, he went out swinging, losing to Firouzja, who finished just half a point from the bottom of the pack. In 2024, he would later reflect on his failures in 2022, saying,
"Halfway through, I was +3 after 7 rounds, Jan was +4, and Magnus was talking about potentially not defending his title. title. I decided it was better to assume that he'll play, and assume that first place is the only place that matters, which in hindsight was a mistake, but that was my feeling.
Fabiano Caruana was 31 years old when the 2024 candidates came around. There was nothing particularly special about this event. By this point, everyone just knew that chess had entered a free-for-all era where anyone could become a world champion. Fabiano was the favorite, as he often is, and just played solidly throughout the entire tournament. In round 8, he faced a minor setback, losing to Hikaru, but then he recovered with wins in round 10 and 12 to stay in contention. Going into round 13, he was half a point behind Jan Nepomniachtchi, Hikaru Nakamura, and Gukesh Damaraju. Gukesh and Caruana would both win their round 13 ties, meaning the tournament would be decided in the final round. Gukesh paired Hikaru in round 14, whilst Fabiano drew Nepomniachtchi. As long as Fabiano's tie with Nepomniachtchi was a draw, Gukesh would be able to draw against Hikaru to win the tournament outright. However, Nakamura was also fighting to win the candidates. Should he beat Gukesh, he'd have great chances. Gukesh did have the black side in his final match against Hikaru, but he was in the best form of his life and defended well to secure a draw. A draw sent Hikaru out of contention, but it wasn't hopeless for Caruana and Nepomniachtchi. If the game was decisive, either player could send the candidates to a tiebreak against Gukesh. In a do-or-die game for Fabiano, he once again collapsed. This was not just bad luck for Fabiano, it was a consistent pattern that's occurred throughout his entire career. He had a +1 advantage with the white side after 21 h4 from Jan, and 3 moves later he was +2 after a mistaken b6 from the Russian. Fabiano had 25 minutes on his clock, but he expertly navigated the middle game on low time. By move 39, he was playing on increment, but was awarded an additional 30 minutes on the 40th move. But on the very next move, he threw his entire advantage away with King A1. Fabiano had assumed that King A1 and King A2 were identical, but they just weren't. One was winning, the other was equal. Nepomniachtchi would even afford Caruana a second chance in this game, playing Knight B3 and handed his opponent a +3 position again. His advantage held well, but his clock didn't. On move 65, in a +6 position, Fabiano's instincts just weren't good enough. He needed to find Queen E8 check, but instead opted for Queen C6, allowing Jan equality. The game ended as a draw on move 109. It was a very emotional game. A usually confident Jan Nepomniachtchi folded in on himself after the draw was agreed. Not because he knew that this was his last chance at becoming a world champion, but because it felt like it should have been Fabiano's. He apologized to Fabiano in the moment, and Fabiano didn't really seem to know where to look. In their analysis, Fabiano seemed to perfectly understand everything that happened. He knew why he was winning, and he knew why he didn't. It became so obvious to him after the fact, he was left wondering why he didn't go for several simpler options.
I'm very sorry.
After 2 long years, Fabiano would again be the favorite at the 2026 candidates. Gukesh Damaraju, who he had lost out to last cycle, was now the world champion. Fabiano qualified through the newly introduced 2024 FIDE circuit. He was the most experienced player in the field, having qualified for every candidate since his debut. Caruana outplayed Nakamura in round 1, drew round 2, and finished round 3 with a statement 19-move win against Wei Yi, who resigned after allowing his bishop to be entombed. After round 3, Fabiano and Dark Horse Sindarov led the candidates by a full point. But in round 4, Fabiano would have to face Sindarov, and the tie wasn't close. Sindarov was advantageous early and won decisively. I kind of got caught in the opening with 16 Rook G8, and I went wrong, he admitted in a post-match interview. Despite a strong continuation after his defeat against Sindarov, come round 7 he was still trailing by 1.5 points. In any other year, the gap would have been closer, but considering Sindarov would end up having the greatest candidate's performance in history, it was beginning to look out of reach for Fabiano early on. And again, like in other years, Fabiano collapsed again. In round 8, he lost to Nakamura, who had not been having a great tournament. He would lose to Anish Giri in round 9, he drew rounds 10, 11, 12, and 13, and finally beat Andrei Esipenko in the final round. But it just wasn't enough. Sindarov finished on a record-breaking 10 points, and Fabiano finished on 7.5. I think to answer the question of why does Fabiano Caruana keep falling short of greatness, we just need to understand that the Candidates is an absolutely brutal tournament. Magnus Carlsen has even said that if he had the chance to play the Candidates in 2026, even though he might be the favorite, there's a good chance he just doesn't win. But in the same sentence, if you gave Magnus Carlsen every single Candidates tournament since 2016, you would assume he wins more than once. So is it just an incredibly difficult tournament combined with a little bit of bad luck for Fabiano? I think it probably started out as both of these things, but now Fabiano has the extra pressure that he doesn't have much time left to actually become a world champion. He spent the best half of his career battling one of the greatest minds in chess history, and with Fabiano turning 34 in under a month, only Korchnoi, Gelfand, Smyslov, and Anand have won the Candidates at an older age. Out of these players, none of them won the following world championship either. Korchnoi lost twice to Karpov, Anand lost to Carlsen, and Gelfand lost to Anand. Sure, you can argue that the world championship in the last few cycles hasn't been as strong, but at youngest, Fabiano will be 36 in his next possible attempt to become a world champion. Then add another 2 years for every attempt after that, and you have to wonder how many serious tries he has left. But chess changes quickly, and writing off Fabiano is of course irrational. But the clock is ticking, and over the next few cycles we'll know if he's got what it takes, or if he'll join the likes of Korchnoi and Keres, who just couldn't quite get there.